When my uncle laughed and said, "She's just a factory worker," I didn't correct him. I let the word just sit in the air. 10 minutes later, the restaurant manager rushed inside and whispered something that drained the color from my father's face. "The chairman is here," he said, "and he's asking for Kessia." The dinner was supposed to be a proud night for our family. Django had just expanded his business, and everyone important was there to celebrate him. The private dining room was full of investors in expensive suits, relatives who only show up for success, and community leaders who wanted to be connected to growth. People were laughing, shaking hands, and praising Django for his hard work. When it was my turn to be introduced, the room became quieter. My father stood up with a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. He spoke confidently about Django's achievements, about profits and expansion plans. Then he mentioned me. "This is our daughter Kessia," he said. "She works at the local factory. A very hardworking girl." That was it. He did not mention my degree. He did not mention my responsibilities. He did not say anything about leadership or strategy. Just a factory worker. The way he said it made it sound small, like I was still trying to figure out my life while everyone else had already succeeded. A few people nodded politely. Some smiled in a way that felt like quiet pity. No one asked what I actually did there. No one seemed curious. The conversation quickly moved back to Django's expansion and future plans. I felt the word factory hang in the air like a label placed on my forehead. Small, ordinary, limited. I could have corrected him. I could have explained everything. But I didn't. I simply smiled, nodded once, and stayed seated. And in that moment, the room decided who they thought I was. Yes, I worked at a manufacturing plant. That part was completely true. Every morning, I entered through the same large gates as everyone else. I wore safety shoes and a helmet when required. I walked across the factory floor where machines ran loudly and workers focused on their stations. From the outside, it looked simple. It looked ordinary. But what my family thought they understood was only the surface. I was not hired to stand on the production line all day. I was not packing boxes or tightening bolts as my permanent role. After finishing my degree in industrial engineering, a degree I paid for mostly on my own because they said it was unnecessary, I applied for a competitive leadership rotation program at that same factory. Very few people were selected. I was one of them. The program was designed to train future operational leaders. That meant I rotated through different departments: production planning, quality control, supply chain, maintenance, and cost analysis. I worked directly with supervisors and managers. I studied performance reports. I analyzed waste, downtime, and process delays. I attended meetings where real decisions were made. My job was not only to observe but to improve systems. Sometimes I stood on the production floor, yes. But I stood there with a notebook, watching patterns, timing processes, asking questions, and calculating losses. I was learning how to manage the entire system, not just one small task. At night, I reviewed data and built reports. I suggested small changes that later saved thousands in operating costs. I was trusted with projects that affected hundreds of workers. Slowly, I became someone people consulted before making adjustments. But at home, none of that mattered. When I first told them about my degree, they said it was too technical and not impressive enough. When I explained the rotation program, they barely listened. So I stopped explaining. At that dinner, when they described me as just a factory worker, they were not lying. They simply did not know the full story. And I did not correct them, because they never really asked what I was building behind those factory doors. For as long as I can remember, my family believed one simple thing: if your title sounded big, then you were important. If it didn't, then you were still trying to become something. In our house, people introduced themselves by job titles before anything else. Manager, director, owner. Those words earned respect. Anything that sounded ordinary was treated like a waiting room. So when I started working at the factory, they never tried to understand what I actually did. To them, factory meant labor. It meant standing all day, following instructions, and earning a basic salary. It did not sound impressive, so they decided it was not impressive. At first, I tried to explain. I told them about my engineering degree. I talked about production systems, cost reduction, and performance targets. I shared how I was part of a leadership program. But every time I spoke, I saw their eyes lose interest. They only became excited when Django spoke about expansion plans, new contracts, and visible growth. Slowly, I understood something. They did not care about the details. They cared about how it sounded. So I stopped defending my work. While Django built his logistics company in public, posting announcements and celebrating milestones, I built my career inside meeting rooms where results mattered more than noise. My work was measured in numbers, not applause, in reduced waste percentages, in improved output rates, in reports reviewed by senior executives. No one clapped when a system became more efficient. No one threw a dinner when a process improved. But inside the factory, my name started carrying weight. Supervisors respected my analysis. Managers requested my input. Decisions changed because of my reports. I learned that real influence does not always announce itself. Sometimes it grows quietly, inside systems that only reward performance. Correcting my family would not have changed their mindset. They needed titles that sounded powerful. I was building something that did not need to sound powerful. It only needed to work. So at that dinner, when they minimized me with one simple description, I did not interrupt. Because I already knew my value. And I knew the numbers would speak when the time was right. Dinner was moving smoothly. Plates were being replaced, glasses were being refilled, and Django was in the middle of explaining his future expansion plans. People were listening carefully, nodding at the right moments. Everything felt controlled and predictable. Then something changed. At first it was small. A waiter walked in quickly and whispered to the manager. Another staff member checked their phone and suddenly stood straighter. 2 more employees moved toward the entrance as if someone important had just arrived. The energy in the room shifted. Conversations became quieter. Even the music in the background felt lower. Guests started checking their phones too. A few investors exchanged confused looks. My uncle leaned toward my father and asked if another VIP had been invited. Within minutes, the restaurant manager entered our private dining room. He looked nervous but excited. He walked directly to my father and bent slightly to whisper in his ear. I watched my father's face carefully. The color drained from it. The manager then spoke louder so everyone could hear. "The chairman of the regional manufacturing board has arrived," he said respectfully. "He just finished visiting a plant nearby and decided to stop here. He is asking for someone." The room froze. Everyone assumed he must be here for Django. After all, tonight was about Django's business growth. It made sense that someone powerful would come to congratulate him. But the manager continued. "He is looking for the project lead who recently restructured the East District manufacturing," he said. "The factory that was losing money for years. The one that increased output without laying off workers." Some investors immediately recognized the story. That factory turnaround had been discussed in business circles. It had become an example of smart management and strategic planning. The chairman had not come for celebration. He had come looking for the person behind that transformation. He was not here for Django's logistics company. He was searching for the leader who had fixed one of the largest underperforming factories in the district, and he was asking for that person by name. In a room full of people who believed they understood exactly who I was, the real reason for his arrival was about to change everything. The door to the private dining room opened slowly, and every conversation stopped at once. The chairman walked in with calm confidence, dressed simply but carrying authority without effort. 2 members of his team followed behind him. No one in the room stayed seated. Investors stood up quickly. My father adjusted his jacket. Django stepped forward, ready to greet him. Everyone expected the chairman to shake my father's hand first or congratulate Django on his expansion. That would have made sense. This was Django's celebration. This was his moment. But the chairman did not move toward my father. He did not even look at Django. Instead, he paused near the entrance and slowly scanned the room, as if searching for someone specific. His eyes moved across the tables, past the investors, past my relatives, past the people trying to look important. Then he spoke clearly. "Where is Kessia?" The question landed heavily in the room. For a second, no one reacted. It was as if people needed time to understand what they had just heard. My name did not belong in this kind of question. Not in this room. Not at this dinner. My uncle, The same one who had laughed earlier and called me just a factory worker looked around with confusion. He even turned slightly, as if expecting another Kessia to stand up. My father's hand froze in midair. Django blinked, trying to process it. Django stepped forward with a polite smile. Perhaps there is some mistake, he said carefully. My sister works at a factory. The chairman looked at him calmly. Yes, he replied. That is exactly why I am here. The silence deepened. You could feel the shift. People who had barely noticed me before were now turning their heads, searching for my reaction. I was still seated. For a brief moment, I saw disbelief in their eyes. How could the chairman of the regional manufacturing board walk into a room full of business owners and ask for someone they had just described as ordinary? It did not look like coincidence anymore. It looked intentional. And in that quiet space, where no one knew what to say next, my name carried a weight it had never carried in that room before. The chairman finally stepped further into the room, his eyes settling on me. I slowly stood up. Every single person was watching now. The same people who had ignored me minutes ago were waiting to understand why I mattered. The chairman spoke calmly, like he was giving a report in a board meeting. The East District manufacturing plant was close to being shut down last year, he began. Waste levels were too high. Output was too low. Profits were dropping fast. Many recommended layoffs. A few investors nodded. They knew the story. But instead of cutting jobs, he continued, a new operational strategy was introduced. Waste was reduced by 38%. Production output increased without hiring new staff. Delivery timelines improved. The plant became profitable again within months. The room was completely silent. This turnaround, he said clearly, has now become a case study for expansion across the region. Other factories are studying this model. Then he looked directly at me. The strategy was led by one person, Kessia. I could feel people turning toward me again, this time not with pity, but with disbelief. He explained how I had analyzed process delays, reorganized workflow systems, and introduced data tracking that identified where materials were being lost. He mentioned the cross-department meetings I led, and the restructuring plan that balanced efficiency without removing workers. He spoke about measurable results, percentages, reports, and long-term projections. This was not small work. This was not entry-level labor. My position, he continued, is to identify leadership potential within our industry. Kessia is currently under review for board-level operational strategy promotion. Promotion. Board level. Those words did not match the picture my family had created of me. The chairman made it clear. I was not simply working in a factory. I was shaping how factories operated. Decisions I helped design were now influencing multiple plants in the district. The same relatives who had barely listened to my introduction were now standing straighter, trying to understand how much they had missed. No one interrupted. No one laughed, because the numbers were real. The results were documented. The impact was measurable. And in that moment, the truth was no longer something I had to explain. It was being confirmed publicly by the highest authority in the room. The chairman's words were still hanging in the air when I looked at Django. His confident smile was gone. For the first time that night, he looked unsure. Django had been proudly talking all evening about a new distribution contract his company was finalizing. He explained how this deal would expand his logistics routes and increase his company's revenue. Everyone clapped when he mentioned the factory partnership that would supply large monthly shipments. That factory, the same East District manufacturing plant. At the time, he spoke as if the deal was almost secured, like it was only a matter of paperwork. What he did not realize was that large contracts connected to that plant required operational approval from the regional board, the board that was now publicly discussing my leadership role. The chairman calmly added more details, explaining that future expansion of the plant would depend on operational stability and strategic partnerships. He mentioned that distribution agreements would be reviewed to ensure they aligned with production capacity and long-term planning. I saw the exact moment it connected in Django's mind. His contract, the factory, the board, me. The approval process for expansion and distribution was not automatic. It passed through review meetings. Meetings I already attended as part of the operational strategy team. Rooms where performance numbers were discussed before decisions were signed. Django had been negotiating confidently, assuming he understood the system. He thought he was building his growth independently, but now he realized that part of his success depended on decisions made in spaces I had access to. Not because I wanted control, not because I planned this moment, but because I had quietly built a position inside the structure he never cared to understand. His eyes met mine, and I could see it clearly. This was not about embarrassment. It was realization. He finally understood that influence does not always sit at the head of the dinner table. Sometimes it sits quietly, taking notes, studying numbers, shaping systems. His expansion plans were strong. His business was real. But the final step, the official approval tied to that factory's output and logistics coordination, would pass through a board that now publicly recognized my contribution. And in that moment, Django saw something he had never seen before. I was not standing behind his success. I was standing inside a system that helped decide it that no one in the room was speaking anymore. All eyes were on me, waiting to see what I would do. Some expected anger. Some expected a loud response. Some probably thought I would use this moment to prove them wrong in a dramatic way. But I stayed calm. I did not look at my family with hatred. I did not try to shame anyone. I did not raise my voice. I simply spoke when the chairman invited me to explain my role. I started with the basics. I said my official title in the factory's leadership rotation program. I explained that I was part of the operational strategy team. I described how my work involved analyzing production systems, reviewing performance data, and improving efficiency across departments. I spoke clearly and slowly so everyone could understand. There was no emotion in my voice, only facts. I explained that my responsibilities included reducing waste, improving output planning, and coordinating with supervisors to ensure targets were met without cutting jobs. I mentioned the measurable results of the factory project. I said that waste had been reduced by 38%. I said that production levels had increased while keeping the same workforce. I explained that delivery performance had improved, and that the factory had returned to profitability. Each time I spoke, the chairman nodded. When I finished a point, he confirmed it in simple words so there would be no confusion. He repeated the results. He confirmed the review status for my promotion consideration. He verified that the turnaround project had been documented as a regional success. The room felt different now. The same relatives who had smiled politely earlier were listening very carefully. No one interrupted. No one joked. No one looked away. My uncle, who had laughed at my introduction, was now silent. Django stood still, his earlier confidence replaced with focus. My father kept his eyes on the table, absorbing every word. I did not say anything personal. I did not speak about how I felt. I did not mention past doubts or family comments. I simply allowed the facts to stand on their own. The chairman's presence made everything clear. He treated my explanation as professional, not emotional. That alone shifted the atmosphere in the room. For the first time that night, my family was not reacting to a title they understood. They were hearing verified information from an authority they respected. And in that quiet moment, without anger or drama, the truth spoke louder than anything else I could have said. The atmosphere in the room had completely changed. Before, the conversation was loud and focused on Django's expansion, profits, and future plans. Now people were no longer talking about celebrations. They were talking about results, systems, and performance. One investor leaned forward and asked me how we managed to reduce waste without cutting jobs. Another asked how we improved output while keeping the same staff. A third wanted to know how the new tracking system worked and how it could be applied to other factories in the region. Their questions were serious. Their tone was respectful. I answered calmly. I explained how small changes in workflow can create big results. I talked about reviewing daily production data, identifying delays, and improving coordination between departments. I described how teamwork was strengthened through clear targets and regular feedback. I spoke about measurable performance, not personal opinions. The investors listened carefully, sometimes writing notes. The chairman allowed the discussion to continue, watching quietly. Every time I explained something, he confirmed that it matched the official reports. That made my answers even stronger. It was no longer just my word. It was documented success. Meanwhile, my father stayed silent. He did not interrupt. He did not smile. He seemed to be processing everything at once. The image he had introduced earlier in the evening no longer matched the reality standing in front of him. Django also became quiet. He was used to being the center of attention. He was comfortable speaking about visible growth, new contracts, and public achievements. But now, he was watching how influence worked differently. It was not only about owning a company or announcing expansion. It was about being part of decisions that shaped industries. For the first time, he understood that value is not always loud. Some roles do not need advertisements. They exist inside structured systems where performance is measured by numbers, not applause. Influence does not always sit at the front of the room. Sometimes it operates behind the scenes, in planning meetings, review sessions, and strategy discussions that the public never sees. As the questions continued, I realized that value was being redefined right in front of everyone. The same people who thought they understood my position were now asking me for guidance. And without arguing or competing, the room itself had changed its opinion. After the chairman left, the room felt quieter, but the dinner did not end. People tried to continue eating and talking, yet the mood was no longer the same. Earlier, the focus was on celebration and titles. Now everyone had seen something different. They had witnessed facts, confirmation, and respect from a powerful authority. That memory stayed in the room. No one made a dramatic apology. No one stood up to give a speech. There was no loud argument. The change was not noisy. It was subtle. People spoke more carefully. Their tone became softer when they mentioned my name. Even the way they looked at me had shifted. I did not try to turn the moment into a victory. I did not ask for attention. I did not remind anyone of what they had said earlier. I did not use the opportunity to make anyone feel small. I simply stayed calm and continued the evening like a professional who had finished an important meeting. When the dinner slowly came to an end, I decided something important for myself. From that day forward, I would no longer accept introductions that reduced my work or made it sound less than it was. If someone wanted to speak about me, they would speak with accuracy and respect, not exaggeration, not dismissal. Just truth. I did not need applause. I did not need public praise. The results of my work were already verified. The chairman had confirmed them. The investors had heard them. The numbers were documented. That was enough. As we left the restaurant, I felt calm. Not proud in a loud way. Not angry. Just steady. I understood something clearly now. Value does not depend on how others describe you. It depends on what you build, what you deliver, and what can be measured. That night was not about proving anything to my family. It was about clarity. I did not change who I was. I did not argue to defend myself. I only let the truth speak. And because the truth had already spoken in that room, no one ever used the word, just near my name again. The introduction changed, the respect changed, and the story they thought they knew was no longer the only version in the room.